Today, I want to offer you a simple life hack that will allow you to start living from a place of grace and ease. And I don't know about you, but if I feel grace and ease inside, I'm much more likely to feel inspired and take action from a place of inspiration. But before I give you this life hack, I just want to invite you to just check in with yourself for a minute. I'd love it if you would feel comfortable enough to just close your eyes and put your hand on your heart. And just ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And you might be feeling super grateful to be here this morning in our amazing community. Or you might be feeling maybe a little anxious because of something going on in your life, or maybe somebody you love and care about. Or maybe you're feeling super excited about what's going to happen this week because something amazing is going to transpire. And as a matter of fact, I promise you it will. But whatever you're feeling right this minute, the primary feeling, I just want you to take note of that. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. I had the most amazing experience a couple of weeks ago, and I had never been to an entertaining opportunity like this before. It was the LA Philharmonic playing, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting his name. Hold on one second. Somebody's Mass in C minor. Starts with an M. Mozart, thank you. Whew. I'm telling you right now. Okay. So anyway, that was quite amazing because it was something that I'm not a symphony kind of a girl, but like when I heard all of those instruments and the opera singers and the choir, I mean, there was literally over 100 choir members, and my body was vibrating along with all of those instruments because that beautiful Disney concert hall just filled up with this beautiful sound. And it was so special and so beautiful. And there's a picture that I took. And before they started to perform, however, I got there early. And so I was able to sit and listen to the musicians as they tuned their instruments. And I could just feel that it was a beautiful experience for them to be preparing to be a part of that symphony. And it occurred to me the next morning that this was a really good analogy for the talk I want to give today. Because each one of those instruments has a vibration, and if they're not tuned to each other, that vibration is not going to provide the ultimate symphony experience to sound as amazing as the LA Philharmonic obviously did. And the same is true about us. We have beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and feelings that all have vibrational quality to them. They're energy. As a matter of fact, quantum physics shows that we live in an energetic universe. We are energetic beings. We are governed by an energetic law, the law of cause and effect. And each one of our thoughts, emotions, feelings, and beliefs is a vibration. And so one of the scientific studies that we talked about when we were in our advanced consciousness class with Dr. James was this theory, the observation effect. And what it is that atoms have obviously waves and particles in them that are influenced by the observer, by the scientist, right? Because their thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and feelings are present, they're energetic, and so they change the way these particles and waves behave. And you and I are like those scientists. We are here in our life experience, observing our lives, maybe if you believe like I do, from the very moment we're conceived. We're in a state of observation in this physical experience, and we start to form beliefs and thoughts and emotions and feelings about those experiences in a way that actually sets cause, energetic experience or influence into effect. And so I don't know about you, but from the time I was a little girl, I lived in an environment that had some effects in it that caused me to develop beliefs about my value in the world. And I could honestly say that your analogy with the Japanese plates was really applicable to my life. I felt flawed, essentially, in my family of origin. Didn't ever feel like I could live up to anybody's expectation. I felt lost, and I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel seen or heard or affirmed or cherished. And as a result of that, I lived my life with a vibration, with an energy that caused me to experience a lot of trauma. And as a result of the trauma and the belief systems that I had, I developed coping mechanisms like numbing with substances and people-pleasing and codependent behavior. And all of it was part of the law of cause and effect, essentially. And so the relationships that showed up in my life were the effect of my beliefs and emotions and feelings. And what I want to share with you also is that this whole understanding of how our beliefs and thoughts impact our lives has been around a long time. Lao Tzu said, "Watch your thoughts because they become your words. Watch your words because they become your actions. Watch your actions because they become your habits. Watch your habits because they become your character, and watch your character because it becomes your destiny." But what happens if we are not conscious of our beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and feelings? They're unconsciously living inside of us, and the law of cause and effect is still operating from them. And we can determine what it is that's going on underneath in the subconscious by looking at the effects that are going on in our life. When I was around 30, the painful experiences that I had had in my life got to a point where I was in a place of desperation. And thankfully, I was guided to take some great classes. I joined Al-Anon, I got some therapy, found A Course in Miracles, and landed at the Church of Religious Science in 1991, so 31 years ago. And it was amazing. I joined right away. Diane Bravant was a member back then. I joined right away, and I became a practitioner, and by year 2000, I became a minister, or graduating minister of this center when it was still over on Townsgate Road. But the thing is that even though I had all this consciousness work underneath my belt, and I could tell you who you were, and I could tell you who I was, and I could tell you about the law of cause and effect and how treatment worked, and I had seen it worked plenty of times in my life and in others, and I had also experienced the fact that I wasn't able to sustain it a lot of times. For some reason, what occurred after aligning with a greater truth sort of dissipated over time. And my life went back to not being as great as I wished it was. In year 2000, I was a single mom, and I had invested all this time and money in all of these classes. And the thing is, I still felt like an imposter inside. And I learned that there's a term for this. It's called spiritual bypass. Maybe some of you have been there or can relate to it. According to John Wellwood, Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist, a spiritual bypass is a tendency to use spiritual ideas, practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. And I can honestly tell you that I was guilty of that. I had experienced a lot of trauma. I never had really gone back and looked at it. Never realized that all the experiences that I had formed beliefs and then coping mechanisms as a result of those beliefs. And it didn't matter how much consciousness work I had done. They were still the cause to the effect I was getting in my life. And after decades of personal trauma, 3 failed marriages, loved ones that were struggling with IV heroin, including my own daughter, I realized that my life was a disaster, and I started to turn my life around. I discovered what I now know is the missing piece. And it's really quite simple. I had a whole lot of beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and feelings that were causing the effects I was getting in my life. And we need to be able to look at, if we're not getting the effects we want in our life, well, what is going on? And so how do we do that? I'm going to share with you a really easy tool in just a minute that you guys can start to use in your own lives so that you can start to integrate all the different pieces of yourselves, parts of yourselves, in a way that allows you to start feeling a deeper sense of grace and ease, so that you can actually start feeling like you're living in the present moment without all of that stuff from the past still impacting the way your life shows up today, right? From the law of cause and effect. So I discovered this psychological and spiritual practice called internal family system work. Internal family system work is a way of no longer seeing ourselves as this monolithic being. Like the symphony is a combination of all of those instruments. And if you only had one instrument playing, it wouldn't be so magnificent, right? You have to acknowledge all of the different parts that are contributing to that magnificence. And you and I are the same. We're like that symphony. We have all of these different parts. And if some of those parts are broken, just like if a string on a violin is broken, or the shell is cracked, or something isn't quite right with the instrument, you gotta tune it up. And so I found internal family systems, and there's a Buddhist monk and IFS practitioner, Everett Considine, who writes about the spiritual practice of IFS, which I know will support us in our own teaching here, religious science, because it helps us learn to bring all of these parts of ourselves, and there's good parts too. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously we all have great parts, but when there's one instrument out of tune, you're still not going to have the symphony experience that you want for your life. And so he says that we all know how sublimely wonderful it feels when we're in the flow and connected. He goes on to say, life is magical, and we move through it with grace and ease. We also know how these sublime experiences can instantly shift and disappear when the complexity of modern life shows up for us. And many times the reason we're pulled out of this deeper connection to life is that the material from our past is being triggered. And protective and wounded parts of ourselves are called to the surface. Internal family systems gives you a way to work with and transform these parts of yourself. And you can gently rebuild the relationships with these parts, heal and transform the deeper wounded parts of yourself. Your authentic self then will begin to shine. And that's what I want for each one of us, is to feel like we're living from a place internally where we are shining, where we do feel inspired. Can you imagine if some of the instruments of the symphony went from being perfect, like I think are when we're first born, right? Like we're born a perfect symphony, I'm pretty sure. And then we have all these things that start to happen in our lives, which will allow some of those instruments to get broken strings. So using IFS in my own life and with my daughters and with my clients has been an amazing journey for me. I have learned what it feels like to greet different parts of myself and see them greet different parts of themselves that come to the surface when you actually seek to get to know them. And we're going to talk about how to do that in just a second. But here's a great example of one of my parts, which was hysterical. I was meditating one day, and I saw this 14-year-old version of myself show up, and she was wearing an army helmet. And I don't visualize like in human visual. I can feel things in my body, I can hear things, I can see shapes and colors, but I never see clearly like what this human experience is. So when I saw her, I was like, this must be like a flashing thing and it's going to go away in a second, because I was pretty deep in my meditation. But she just sat there and stared at me. And I'm like, wait a minute, why is there a 14-year-old version of myself wearing an army helmet sitting here in my meditation with me? And all of a sudden it occurred to me, you know what? When I was 14 years old, my life sucked. I moved out of my parents' house and they didn't try to stop me. And so I developed belief systems, and they'd already been pretty well developed then, but it was really clear to me that I wasn't worth keeping around. And boy, I'll tell you what, all the relationships in my life pretty much verified that throughout my adult years. But in any case, it occurred to me that this army helmet girl had shown up because she was trying to teach me that she was a protector that had been protecting this 14-year-old self for all of these years, and that she was kind of done being that protector. And her way of protecting me was to be a shield for anybody seeing how imperfect this 14-year-old girl was. And she just wanted everybody to see her as perfect, as strong, as powerful, and she didn't need anybody. But that had been impacting my entire life. 3 failed marriages, kids who didn't talk to me for years. And so I sat with her for a minute, and I got really curious, and I told her, I'm like 50 something now, and you don't need to protect that 14-year-old anymore, because I have some great relationships in my life today. I've got amazing kids, and I'm a grandma, and I work with people who feel flawed just like that 14-year-old did, and they're doing good too. And I was like, do you mind taking the helmet off? And she actually did. And that was a beautiful moment. It really, truly was. And when that happened, I literally felt the inside of me expand. It was like something that had been digging at me and living in me for so long just surrendered. And I did feel a sense of grace and ease. And you know what? After that, I kind of stopped wearing heels. I'm pretty much a Converse kind of girl these days. You might have noticed when I first came in this morning. But and I stopped wearing much makeup, and I just sort of let my hair down. And it was a huge shift for me. I didn't have to be the perfectionist that I always thought I had to be, who felt like the only thing that was valuable was my external appearance and the aesthetics of my life. When in fact, by sitting down and really contemplating the value of who this 50-something-year-old woman was with this 14-year-old self, it somehow just transformed me. And I'll say that this kind of work is not just effective with trauma or situations like I just explained, but it can also be used to manifest great stuff in your life. As a matter of fact, one of my friends was telling me the other day, she's a coach as well, that she was working with this really successful businessman who owned 9 companies, and he kept getting sick. I mean, really sick. And he went in and did some parts work with her, and he found a part inside of himself that identified as the one who was making him sick all the time. And so he asked him, well, what do I need to do to let you give me a break and stop making me sick all the time? And this part of him said, you need to sell 7 of your 9 companies. And you know what? This man was so sick that he did. And within several months, his 2 remaining companies were more lucrative than all the 9 together, and he was able to start enjoying his life with his family in a way he hadn't for probably decades. So this work can be used to manifest great stuff with it as well. And let's see, real quick. I've got to tell you about the conductor. My God, that's a huge part of the symphony, right? You are the conductor as well as all the instruments. Now, the conductor is this infinite quantum field of pure potentiality that you are. But just like in the symphony, if there's one instrument that's not tuned up, it doesn't matter how good the quantum field is or the conductor is, it's still not going to sound right. And the same is true in our lives. We do have the potential to have an extraordinary symphony, But if we don't go back and love those parts of us that need to feel seen and heard and affirmed and celebrated and have a sense of belonging with us in our life today, in our present now, and let them know they don't need to protect us from the stuff that happened 35, 40 years ago, or even last week. Because we've got the ability to work together, and we assign them new roles, and they take on new roles, and before you know it, you're living from a state of grace and ease in this now moment, because all of those parts are working together instead of independent of each other. So I invite you to look back to the feeling you had when I asked you to check in a little while ago. And if you were feeling great, that's awesome. Thank that part of yourself. Thank it and love it and let it know how much you appreciate it. And if it was a feeling that wasn't as great as you want it to be, do the same. Thank it for being there because it has something to teach you. Thank it, love it, celebrate it, and invite it to work with you. Through communication, that's the key, you guys. You got to communicate with these parts. Check in with them. And that's the hack I want to share with you. It's called the daily check-in. And I do this twice a day. I did it this morning. You wouldn't believe the parts that showed up before I came and gave this talk today. But you check in with your parts and you do two things. You say, how am I feeling? Because one of those parts might come forward. And then you ask if there's any parts that want to come forward. And whatever it is, you check in with them and you say, what do you need most from me right now? And you help them to feel seen and heard and affirmed and celebrated. And you help them reframe whatever it is they need to reframe so that they can support you in making your symphony today one that is as magnificent as the LA Philharmonic was. And these daily conversations that you have with your parts are like, well, hopefully they'll have the experience of the lyrics that Dolly Parton's song Together You and I share with her loved one. Oh my God, those lyrics are so beautiful and so uplifting. And all of our parts need us to tell them, my love for you is deeper than the depths of any ocean. And we'll always be together, you and I. Thank you. Namaste.